For the nation of Nepal, migration isn't just a choice, it's a lifeline. But here's the thing, that lifeline comes at an almost unbearable human cost. Today, we're going to unpack the story of a country whose single greatest export has become its own people. All right, let's get into it.
Okay, to really get what's going on here, you have to start with this one, frankly staggering number. More than a quarter of Nepal's entire economy is powered by money sent home from workers abroad. I mean, think about that. This isn't just a slice of the pie. For millions of people, it is the pie. It's the single most critical artery keeping the nation's heart beating.
And that right there, that brings us to the core paradox we're going to be exploring. How can something so vital for a country's survival also be the source of so much personal pain and suffering? Is this a story of economic success, or is it a profound human crisis? Well, the truth is, it's both.
So, to get to the bottom of this, we're going to walk through 5 key chapters. First, we'll look at the history, how this went from a story of pride to one of desperation. Then, we'll dig into the modern migration machine itself. After that, we'll follow the money, that remittance lifeline. We'll also have to balance the books on the human cost. And finally, we'll ask, why is this cycle so incredibly hard to break?
All right, let's start with that history. Because you see, to really understand the chaos of today's migration, you first have to understand the order of the past. This whole story didn't start with construction sites in the Gulf. Nope, it began with the legendary Gurkha regiments. For nearly 200 years, when you talked about migration from Nepal, you were talking about one thing, the Gurkhas. After a treaty way back in 1816, serving in the British and Indian armies became this path of immense prestige. It was a huge honor. But then, in the 1990s, everything changed. A new democracy and a liberalized economy opened the floodgates. And at the same time, a brutal Maoist insurgency created this massive push factor, driving millions of young people out, not for honor anymore, but for sheer survival.
And this right here really lays out that dramatic shift. On the one hand, you had the Lahore of the past, a symbol of success, part of a state-controlled, pretty exclusive system. And on the other hand, you have the modern migrant, who is driven by pure desperation, forced to navigate this chaotic, market-driven system run by private agencies. It's a total flip. Pride became survival. And prestige, well, that just became volume.
Okay, so that's the history. Now let's look at what it's built, the modern migration machine. The big questions are, where exactly are people going? And what are the systems that are getting them there? And this chart really tells the story. You can see just how concentrated it is. The vast majority of Nepali migrants are ending up in just a handful of places. We're talking the Gulf states, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and also Malaysia. These countries are the engine room of this whole exodus, and they're mostly hiring for what are known as the 3D jobs: dirty, dangerous, and demeaning. So how do people even get these jobs? Well, there are basically 2 main paths. The first, and by far the most common, is through private recruitment agencies. This is a high-cost, high-risk system that's pretty much run by a powerful few. Then there's the other path, government-to-government programs for places like South Korea. Now, these are safer, they're more transparent, but they're also extremely limited and super competitive, and they come with their own set of intense pressures.
And lately, there's this new dream that's popped up, Europe. But just look at that price tag. To land a job in a country like Romania or Croatia, migrants are shelling out around $7,500. That means taking on absolutely crippling debt for a future that is, frankly, anything but guaranteed.
Which brings us right back to the money, doesn't it? All this risk, all this debt, it's all for one thing, to feed that remittance lifeline that literally holds the entire Nepalese economy together.
I mean, this money is everything. It's the primary source of foreign currency that allows the country to pay for all its imports. It's what keeps their trade balanced. It's basically the dam holding back a total economic collapse, kind of like what we saw in Sri Lanka. And on a more personal level, it has been the single biggest factor in lifting millions upon millions of people out of poverty. It's huge.
But here's the catch. This flood of foreign cash has a really tricky hidden side effect. It's an economic concept called Dutch disease. And what it means, essentially, is that all this easy money from abroad actually makes it harder for local businesses and farms to compete. I mean, why would you bother with the backbreaking work of farming when a wire transfer from the Gulf can pay all the bills? The result is that it slowly but surely hollows out the economy back home.
And this chart right here shows us exactly where all that hard-earned money is going. You can see the huge chunks, right?
daily living expenses, paying off those massive loans, housing. But the most telling part, the most important part, look at that tiny, tiny sliver for productive investment. We're talking less than 5%. So the money isn't really being used to build a new, sustainable economy at home. It's just being used to survive inside the old one.
And this is where the story shifts. We've talked about the big picture, the macroeconomics. Now we have to zoom in on the deeply personal. It's time to balance the books on the human ledger, to weigh all those financial gains against the truly devastating social costs.
Remember those 3D jobs we mentioned earlier? Dirty, dangerous, and demeaning? Wow. This is the reality. This is a glimpse of it. These are the men who are literally building the modern skylines we see, but they're doing it in conditions that can strip them of their dignity and, all too often, their health.
And a psychological toll, it's just staggering. Let's take South Korea, which is actually considered one of the best destinations for migrants. The pressure there is so immense that between 2007 and 2019, nearly a third of all deaths among Nepali migrants were suicides. This isn't just a number on a chart. It's a silent epidemic of despair, and it's fueled by debt, by crushing loneliness, and by just grueling, relentless work.
Meanwhile, back home in Nepal, the very fabric of society is starting to fray. These long separations are leading to rising divorce rates. Kids are growing up with what experts call a parental deficit, missing a mom or a dad. The women who are left behind, they face this overwhelming double burden of handling everything at home while also dealing with intense social scrutiny. And it's not just social. The physical cost is immense. Many workers return with chronic health problems like kidney failure from years of labor in the extreme heat of the Gulf.
So all of this brings us to our final and maybe most important section. Why? Why does this brutal cycle just keep going? Why does a system that takes so much from its people fail so badly at protecting them or at giving them a reason to stay home in the first place? Well, a huge part of the answer lies right here. A massive failure in governance. See, the government has this policy called free visa, free ticket. On paper, it's supposed to protect workers from being exploited, but in the real world, it's basically a myth. Less than 1% of workers actually get that deal. Everybody else is left completely at the mercy of those recruitment agencies. And this table, this just lays the exploitation bare. It's shocking. On the left, you've got the official price, what the government says it should cost. And on the right, that's the grim reality of what people are actually forced to pay. Look at Qatar. They're charged 20 times the legal limit. For Malaysia, a free ticket costs them almost $2,000. And for Europe, the fees are they're off the charts. It's a massive, illegal system that's just operating out in the open.
And you'd think that for the few who do manage to come home with some savings and new skills, the struggle would be over. But it's not. The cycle isn't finished. They can't get loans to start a business. The skills they learned abroad often don't apply back in Nepal. They run into this giant wall of bureaucracy and red tape. And what's the result? Many are forced into what's called circular migration. They simply have no other choice but to pack their bags and leave all over again.
Which leaves us with this final, really challenging question. This whole system, it acts as a vital safety valve, right? It prevents economic collapse, it reduces poverty, but it does all of that at a staggering, almost unthinkable human price. So the ultimate question for Nepal isn't just, how do we manage migration better? It's something much deeper. It's whether a nation whose most valuable export has become its own young people can ever truly build a sustainable future for itself at home.